You know, cereal really is the worst food you can eat. It clogs your arteries with plaque. I was having this conversation a couple of days ago with a friend, and he said, "Oh, no, not my cereal. It's healthy." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Which cereal are you talking about?" Honey Nut Cheerios. So I looked up the food label and I read it off to him, and he said, "Oh, no, you're reading regular Cheerios. Those are bad for you. Honey Nut is healthy because it's got honey and nuts in it." And then I read the regular cereal and then the honey nut cereal. It was worse. So it really is bad. In this video, we're going to talk about how it does that damage to people, why Big Food is so good at hiding that damage with things like this little a heart logo that implies that it's actually healthy for your heart. We're also going to talk about finding a healthy cereal. My friend and trainee, Jesus, is going to make a noble quest into Walmart to find a healthy cereal. Sugar in these things, sugar and these highly processed carbs, they hit our stomach and raise our blood sugar. Sometimes they even can be absorbed through the mouth. They go straight into our bloodstream and our blood sugar goes up and we feel it. But guess what? What happens when your blood sugar goes up? Then your insulin has to go up to control that blood sugar because our body knows it's not healthy. And what happens when you get high insulin and high sugar? It starts inflammation, the inflammation process. And that inflammation results in scarring and clogging your arteries. That's where plaque comes from, which is also where heart attacks and strokes come from. And blindness, number one cause, and kidney disease, kidney failure, putting somebody on dialysis. And for you men, even erectile dysfunction. So cereal's not as harmless as the cereal makers would like for you to believe. So let's break this down. The main ingredients in many cereals are processed grains, stripped of their natural nutrients, stripped of their fiber, and getting that carb straight into your bloodstream to raise your blood sugar. Unless, of course, it's the fructose part. And as many of you already know, fructose tends to jump over the bloodstream part. It doesn't raise your blood sugar as much. And you might think, well, that's good. But unfortunately, it goes straight to the liver, causing things like fatty liver. So to make these cereals palatable, manufacturers add that sugar and the hydrogenated oils. And not just that. They also use brightly colored boxes, dyes in the cereals to make them an outlandish blue, green, purple, and red. They use cartoon mascots to make mom feel better. They say, oh, it's been fortified with vitamins and minerals. So what's not to like? It may be kind of silly looking, but it's got all the vitamins and minerals your child needs, right? These processed foods create a perfect storm for inflammation and plaque buildup in your arteries. Now let's go a little bit deeper on how this happens. You see, contrary to the common belief that fat causes arterial plaque, the main culprit is actually excess sugar. Any sugar that raises your blood sugar, any carbohydrate that raises your blood sugar, all these things are turned into sugar in the bloodstream. These, when taken in excess, damage the lining of the artery wall, leading to inflammation. That's why the body tries to use glucose as the first source of energy. It wants to get that glucose out of there where it knows it's inflaming the lining of the artery wall. That is, your body already wants to make sure that you don't have excessive levels of sugar, glucose, lying around in the bloodstream. But what if we've already got too much glucose, too much energy in that cell, and it's trying to find places to store that excess glucose that's coming in? Then it goes to fat cells, and it starts turning it into fat. Or glycogen. Now, excess glucose can be stored as glycogen. Muscle cells do that, and liver cells do that as well. If you're not a science geek or an organic chemistry geek, it's really simple. Glycogen is just one glucose attached to another glucose, attached to another glucose. It's just chains of glucose molecules. Now, excess glucose can be metabolized in the liver and unfortunately turned into fat as well. And you've heard about fatty liver. It's one of the public health problems these days. It used to be when people had liver disease, it was almost cirrhosis. It was almost always due to alcohol. Not anymore. Now it's more often due to fatty liver, which is caused by exactly what we're talking about here. Excess carbohydrates and an inability to manage the carbohydrates that we are swallowing, that we're eating. Multiple places can be used as storage for fat. If you've gotten all the energy you need and now you start storing that excess glucose as fat, you can find it under the skin. These little saddlebags here around the belly, inside your belly, around organs. That's called visceral fat. And that visceral fat, by the way, is very aggressive at creating prediabetes. If you've ever had a steak or seen a steak where they have a lot of what's called marbling, guess what that marbling is? That's ribbons of fat within the muscle of the animal, of the cow, for example. How did that cow get that ribbon of fat in its muscles? You ever heard of corn-finished beef? And that's exactly what happens to us when we're corn-finished. When we eat too many carbs, like that cow ate before the slaughter. You turn the cow into a diabetic, you turn the human into a diabetic, and then you get these ribbons of fat through our muscles. So back to the comparison between healthy Honey Nut Cheerios, because they've got honey and nuts, and regular Cheerios. So this is regular Cheerios, 29 grams of highly ultra-processed, ground to a powder carbs in 1.5 cups. Now, I've already measured this out because this is not that easy, for me anyway. So here's 1 cup, and here is another 1/2 cup. As you see, I don't think when people do eat cereal that's what they eat. Now, this is the healthy stuff, the Honey Nut Cheerios, 30 grams of carbs, so it's more carbs, in 1 cup. So it's like, oh my gosh. It's a good thing I don't eat cereal, isn't it? I'd make a mess. And that's way too much. Let me measure this out here. This is 1 cup, 1 healthy serving of the healthy cereal, Cheerios, nut and honey. 30 grams of carbs, 29 grams of ultra-processed carbs. Either of these is going to kill you. And then take this and make it what a normal dose is. This is suicide. Oh, and I almost forgot. The reality is, this is Cheerios. It lowers cholesterol, and so it's healthy for your heart. And you see, it's in a nice little heart. So what can I be thinking? This is really good for you, right? Why has cereal clogged more arteries than any other meal? How common is it to eat cereal? Most of us have, I don't know, maybe a dozen different variations of dinner that we eat, some more, some maybe a little bit less. And then when you get to lunch, well, we're working during lunch. It's not the time to stop and relax and have fun with people. So we usually have fewer different selections. You know, I tend to have some kind of meat, like a hamburger meat or salmon or pork, plus cauliflower or something like that. That's for lunch, you know, half a dozen different variations. Now go back to breakfast. What do you eat for cereal now? And what did you eat for cereal when you were a kid? Now think about it. With breakfast, you're just waking up. You're not wanting to be creative. You're not wanting to spend time making a meal. And so it starts to insinuate itself into your lifestyle. It's cheap, It's easy. There's a box that looks good and then some milk in the fridge. You put them together and you've got a great tasting, sugary breakfast. And it's full of grains, full of cornstarch, which may be even worse than grains. It's full of sugar. Try potassium phosphate. Try saying that quickly 3 times. High fructose corn syrup, which is just in almost everything that's processed these days, because high fructose corn syrup is addictive. And you may say, oh, that you're stretching it. You're one of those weirdos. No, there's science showing high fructose corn syrup is addictive. There's plenty of studies showing that it lights up those same nuclei as cocaine. So natural flavors, that's something else you see in cereal. Now, wonder how they define the term natural in natural flavors. Now we get to the artificial stuff, right? Artificial dyes, hydrogenated oils. And again, when it's a word like that, hydrogenated, it can't be good, right? Now, think about the marketing behind this. They have little characters on there that are cartoon characters. Tony the Tiger. And by the way, yes, if you've guessed it, you haven't seen any of my other videos mentioning it, don't let Tony the Tiger take over your dinner. It's not enough for Tony to own breakfast. Now he wants dinner. And fortunately, a lot of people have stood up, have gotten their back up and said, no, don't let that happen. And I couldn't agree more. And you won't be able to agree more either if you make it through this video. Marketing is deceiving kids. And if the kid wants it, it's hard for a lot of parents to say no.
Hey there, I'm Dr. Vega. I'm Dr. Brewer's trainee.
So here in the beginning, Jesus says he's my trainee. And yeah, as we've talked about, yes, he is. He's pretty senior, though, in terms of trainee perspective. And trainees often learn things that the teacher didn't know. So I see that sometimes with Jesus now. It's very exciting to see what he has accomplished in this space.
And today, I'm going to try to find the world's healthiest cereal at Walmart.
The world's healthiest cereal at Walmart. I'm glad he did the little air quotes because he's not going to find a healthy cereal at Walmart. He's just not.
But look at this. This is supposed to be the dietary product. That's impressive. How people can really think that all this stuff is healthy.
So as you see, these are in Spanish, but the damage is the same. In fact, as he and I have talked, you could almost make a case that there's more damage to the Spanish American and Hispanic populations because of a lot of the things in the cultural foods, like a lot of corn sources in those foods. Another difference that you see here is in the upper right-hand corner where it says exceso calorías. Basically, it looks like the Mexican government has got some regulation to where you have to post it on the front of the food. So, good for them. So back to where you can store this fat. Believe it or not, you can store this fat in your bloodstream as well. It starts getting transported in your bloodstream. And that's one of the things that we look for in patients that come to see us. We look for triglycerides. Now, not just triglycerides floating around freely in the blood. We look for specifically where those triglycerides are. We look at a thing called lipid fractionation, and that just means fractionation of the lipid or cholesterol particles. Because believe it or not, those same particles that carry cholesterol also carry these triglycerides or fats. And that's what we're looking for. If you've got too much insulin, if you've got too much what we call metabolic disease, prediabetes, diabetes, you can't really burn that triglyceride very well. So that triglyceride starts piling up. As we said, you start storing it under your skin, around your belly, on your hips, around the organs inside your belly, and inside these particles, the triglyceride-containing particles. They're called chylomicron remnants, IDL, VLDL. But you don't have to remember any of that. I'm getting a little bit too geeky. Insulin helps us store that excess glucose, but also stops you from burning it. That's a key thing that most doctors don't know, and it's a key to this whole metabolic disease process. So let me repeat that. Insulin helps us store excess glucose, But insulin also stops you from burning fat. It stops you from burning fat. So what does that have to do with cereal? So when you eat cereal, the excessive amount of carbohydrates goes through this pathway, high sugar in the blood, and then too much excess carbohydrate in the cells. So the fat cells pull that sugar out of the blood and start storing that sugar into the converted fat. Now, let's say you want to use that fat. If your insulin is high, it keeps you from doing that. Now, over time, insulin's just not able to keep up. And here's part of the reason. Fat cells, if they grow too large, they can cause major inflammation, and even they can outgrow their vascular supply, the arteries and veins, and even die and start to rot within your body. That is very, very bad. So fat cells have a mechanism to cut themselves off, sort of like what the engineers would call a dead man switch. And so here's the way that works. If the fat cell's getting too big for its vascular supply, it starts to create a thing called resistin. Resistin helps it resist insulin, and therefore that fat cell can no longer take sugar from the blood into the fat cell to turn that sugar into fat. That's all good so far. But then you got to realize that resistin also works on the insulin receptors of the liver and the muscles and all the other fat cells. So now what started off as an inability to just metabolize carbs causes raised blood sugar, then more insulin. Insulin shuts off our ability to store fat or to burn fat. Now we're getting insulin resistant and we can't burn either carbs or fats anymore. You get chronically elevated levels of insulin. That becomes ineffective, and it's what we call insulin resistance. This is a very inflammatory process. Insulin resistance leads to prediabetes and diabetes. This is just vastly underdiagnosed. 90% of the people that have this problem have no clue. Well, that's good because there's not a lot of people with the problem, right? That's also wrong. The last NHANES study, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Study, part of the U.S. Census, where they do full exams and even do lab tests, indicated that over half of us, by the time we are 18 years old, not starting at 60, 18 years old, over half of us, 52%, have diabetes or prediabetes, and 90% of us don't even know it. So, is it a great way to start your day with a major load of extremely ultra-processed carbs with other things in it like artificial colors and maltodextrin? You get started in that morning, your blood sugar goes way up, your insulin starts cranking way up trying to control it, and then all of a sudden, then it goes way down. And what happens when your blood sugar goes down like that? You get hungry again. So you're on that glucose insulin roller coaster. So that's not where you want to be. Damage in your arteries starts with insulin resistance, and it gets worse when you develop prediabetes and diabetes. These are all just levels of the same disease. You won't feel anything until it's too late. And maybe that's not the worst part. Maybe the worst part is that 84% of Americans consume cereal regularly. Let me repeat that. Despite all of the information, all the facts that we just talked about, 84% of Americans consume cereal regularly. Going through this pathway over and over and over again, starting first thing in the morning. So then you combine cereal with other junk food that's also rich in unhealthy carbs. And voila, you get a country where the number one cause of death is heart attacks and strokes. Let's take a closer look at some other components here.
A lot of calories and sodium. 35 grams for every...
And as you see there, what was that? 30 grams, 36, 35 grams of carbohydrates per serving. You know what? Even if you're trying to just limit your carbs to 100 per day, which is, just a starting point, 40 grams, that's not what most people eat in terms of cereal for breakfast. So most people are going to be blowing past that 35 grams really quickly with 80 grams of cereal and a bunch of orange juice. He's pointing out another good point. It's making things look beautiful. Well, here's the thing. If it's in a package that they've had to make it look beautiful, and if they've had to put a food label on, be afraid. Imagine you're driving a classic 67 Mustang down Route 66. Sounds neat, doesn't it? The open road symbolizes freedom and health, but what if debris starts accumulating? Over time, that smooth, wonderful open ride starts to become rough. The roads get blocked. You develop engine trouble. The car's starting to vibrate. And that's precisely what happens inside your arteries when you're consuming processed foods laden with hydrogenated oils, maltodextrin, colorants, natural flavors, and most of all, way too many ultra-processed carbs. So we talked about a couple of other things too, things like maltodextrin and, quote, natural flavors. These additives, while enhancing the taste, texture, and shelf life of food, act as roadblocks to your cardiovascular health, creating inflammation that contributes to heart disease. Maltodextrin is a highly processed carbohydrate. It's a carbohydrate. It's derived from starches, and it's commonly used as a thickener and filler in processed foods, including sauces, snacks, energy drinks, and, of course, cereal. While it lacks the overt sweetness of sugar or high-fructose corn syrup, it's got an incredibly high glycemic index. It causes rapid spikes in blood glucose levels and initiates that whole inflammatory cascade. Harmful effects in a chain coming your way. Excessive blood glucose levels lead to the formation of advanced glycation end products. You remember what the most common advanced glycation end products? Hemoglobin A1C. It's when glucose has bonded to the hemoglobin in your red blood cells. Glycation is just a process where sugar in the blood binds to proteins. And what proteins is it going to bind to? Well, obviously hemoglobin, but also the proteins in the artery wall and proteins that are in the blood and the serum itself. This disrupts normal cellular function. AGEs, these glycation end products, are like rust forming on your classic Mustang, weakening its structure over time. Now, let's talk about some research in diabetes, vascular disease. It has shown that AGEs contribute to oxidative stress and vascular inflammation. And by the way, if you know any chemistry teachers that mess around with cars, ask them what oxidation is, and they'll tell you, oh, it's rust. So this sounds like an analogy, but sometimes this is not just an analogy, it's the real thing. Oxidative stress causes vascular inflammation. It impairs the endothelial function, the lining of the artery wall, and promotes that arterial plaque buildup. Moreover, maltodextrin's rapid absorption means it doesn't satiate hunger, often leading to overconsumption of calories. Now, this is one thing you need to know. The big food, like Tony the Tiger and the other folks that make cereals, they have these focus groups. They bring people together and they have a bunch of people taste different things. If it tastes good, that's great. If it satisfies, that's not really what they want. They want something that does not satisfy. They want something that's going to make you eat more and more and more. Because if you buy more of their product, obviously, that's great for the health, the financial health of that corporation, and it's terrible for your health. So the financial health of the big cereal, the big food corporations, thrives off of sucking your body's health out of it. Excess caloric intake means increased weight gain, increased insulin resistance, increased body fat. These are major contributors to chronic inflammation and cardiovascular disease. Artificial food colorants make products visually appealing. But again, at what cost? Studies suggest that some synthetic dyes, such as red 40, yellow number 5, may provoke inflammatory responses and oxidative stress. Research in food and chemical toxicology indicates that these dyes can damage cellular DNA. It can disrupt mitochondrial function, the energy factories of cells. I used to say I'm just so focused on blood sugars that I'm not even going to mention the dyes and all the other things involved. But the reality is we need to know. So we're covering it. While evidence directly linking food colorants to cardiovascular inflammation is still emerging, their contribution to overall oxidative stress and systemic inflammation just should not be ignored. For a boomer generation that grew up with natural, home-cooked meals, the rise of synthetic additives in modern diets does represent a significant shift in the wrong direction. Now, natural flavors. That's an umbrella term for substances derived from plant or animal sources designed to enhance taste without revealing their exact composition. They may sound harmless. The lack of transparency obviously should raise a concern. Some natural flavors contain compounds that might trigger allergic or inflammatory responses in sensitive individuals. For example, certain flavoring agents have been shown to interact with immune cells, prompting the release of inflammatory cytokines. You remember that cytokine storm back in the days of COVID? Yeah, it's the same thing, inflammatory cytokines. Think of it as a small hidden leak in your car, that nice Mustang's fuel line. It might seem insignificant, but over time, it can cause very serious problems. Now let's talk about the consequence, clogged arteries. Let's go back to the car. Imagine you're driving along that scenic highway in that classic 65 Mustang. It's a beautiful ride, smooth, efficient, enjoyable. But over time, debris, dust, and then gravel start to gather on the road. Gravel, branches, even maybe some larger obstacles like bricks, junk that's fallen out of big trucks that are transporting things. Suddenly, you begin to notice that your once clear highway is now blocked and traffic slows to a crawl. This is a lot like what happens inside your arteries when you develop a condition called atherosclerosis, in short, just clogged arteries. Now, what is that? What is arterial plaque? How does it develop? What are the types of plaque? There are types of arterial plaque, and that may sound a little bit geeky, but hang in there with us because that's really the important part, because the danger is in soft plaque. So let's go back and talk about what this means. While some plaque hardens over time, that might be called calcified plaque in the artery. There's another type of plaque called low-density non-calcified or soft plaque. And it's that soft plaque that's the problem because it's not stable. It's especially dangerous because it's prone to rupture, potentially causing life-threatening events like heart attacks or strokes. Now, why is soft plaque more dangerous? Calcified plaques can still cause problems by narrowing the arteries. Soft plaques are like ticking time bombs. They're more likely to rupture, triggering the formation of blood clots that blocks the artery completely. So you begin to see people get this idea, and even cardiologists continue to inflate and distribute this idea. It's wrong that plaque just tends to grow and close off the artery. What's actually happening is you get soft plaque. It's like a little ball of pus in the artery in a pimple. And if that soft plaque releases, it causes a clot. The clot is what kills you, not the plaque. Think of calcified plaque as a pothole in your street. It's like a pimple on the face of somebody with acne. It's annoying. It can cause some damage. Again, if it's a pothole in the street, it can cause some damage to the car if you hit it. But it's not likely to change that suddenly. Soft plaques, on the other hand, are like a sinkhole forming beneath the road. It may look stable on the surface, but without warning, it just can collapse, creating major problems. When these plaques rupture, the body treats it as an injury and sends platelets, blood cells that help with the clotting, to seal the clot, the rupture. But this clotting response can quickly spiral out of control creating a blood clot large enough to block the artery entirely. And that's the problem. If this happens in what we call a coronary artery, the vessels that supply blood to the heart, it causes a heart attack. If it happens in the carotid arteries or arteries up inside the brain, it leads to a stroke. Now, why is soft plaque unstable? Scientific studies have shed light on why these plaques are so dangerous. Soft plaques are filled with inflammatory cells. Like I said, that pus or snot. It makes their structure weaker and more prone to rupture. Research also shows that inflammation plays a key role in destabilizing these plaques. Immune cells attracted to the plaque by chronic inflammation release enzymes that weaken the fibrous cap covering the plaque, increasing the likelihood of rupture. Arteries don't get clogged overnight. It's a slow process. Starts as early as your 20s or 30s, and sometimes even earlier. As early as you're eating cereal every day.
See, oatmeal. Is oatmeal healthy? This instant oatmeal, though, does have a lot of sugar.
You know, I used to get this thing all the time when people would come in that hadn't seen my channel. Not so much now that most people have seen the channel, but in the past they used to say, you can't tell me that oatmeal is not healthy. I know it is. And I just get caught up in that debate. Wear me out. And then I decided, I got smart and I said, you know what? I'm not going to debate that one with you. What I would like for you to do is get a finger stick glucometer or a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, and wear that and watch what's happening to your glucose 30 minutes after eating oatmeal. Now, oatmeal is not the same thing as steel-cut oats. Steel-cut oats is a very, very different thing, and your body treats them differently.
Gluten, soy, nuts. I gotta say, this is probably not the worst ones, and it's not instant oatmeal, so I might as well take one of the, which doesn't seem to have maltodextrin. It's a simple process, though. So we didn't find any healthy cereal, unfortunately. But I got two options for oatmeal. The classic one, which doesn't seem to be instant oatmeal, and we got instant oatmeal. So for a future video, we're going to compare those two. Bottom line, no healthy cereal over here.
I agree with Dr. Jesus's last comment. There's nothing healthy in that space. And I've seen plenty of people use regular oatmeal, and that usually doesn't work very well either. So as he said, we'll do a comparison and we'll see how that pans out. If it were steel-cut oats, it would have said it. If it takes a long time to make it, then it's going to take a long time for your body to turn it into sugar. And that gives your body a longer time to react to the sugar, more time to get that insulin out there, and your insulin receptors more time to react to it. If it cooks quickly, the quicker it cooks, the quicker your body turns it into sugar. Now, what about oatmeal? Is that a healthy option? You know, Jesus was unable to find a healthy cereal out there. There's some potential for a couple of them, but really, no. Well, what about oatmeal? Can oatmeal raise your blood sugar too? Oatmeal is a grain. It's made from a grain. And it depends on the oatmeal itself. And it depends on how the oats are processed. If it's processed down to a meal where it's a bunch of a powder or a bunch of flakes, it's usually going to be instant. You can cook that instantly and turn it into that mush. Unfortunately, that also means your body can instantly turn those oats into glucose in your blood. But there's another type of oat that's different. It's called steel-cut oats. And when you look at them, they look like little BBs. You can't cook these instantly. It takes a half hour to get that heat into there and soften that thing up. The longer it takes to cook the oats, the longer it will take your body to absorb them, minimizing the risk of the blood sugar roller coaster and therefore plaque buildup. So you can get oats, but when you do, get steel-cut oats, not instant oatmeal. Okay, so I get it. People tell me sometimes, they used to tell me all the time, and I'm trying to get better. They'd say, Doc, you're too theoretical. Just tell me what to eat. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Here's what I eat for breakfast. I eat eggs with butter and sometimes a lot of bacon, sometimes a lot of sausage. I love them. There's some other things I eat here too, and there's an animal product in here that I eat, but I'll save that for later. So here's the eat side, and here's the don't eat side. Don't eat Frosted Flakes. Tony the Tiger doesn't need to take over your dinner, and you need to kick him out of your breakfast too. Don't eat Lucky Charms. Don't eat Captain Crunch, Cheerios, and even as we've said before, Nut and Honey cereal, Cheerios is not healthier. In fact, it's worse than regular Cheerios. So here's what to eat. If you don't want to eat eggs and bacon and butter and sausage, you can eat some of this stuff. We talked about steel-cut oats. I'm not going to talk about those again. Here's one of the first things. You say, well, I don't want to eat a bunch of crunchy almonds for breakfast. Almond butter. My fiance eats almond butter for breakfast every day. Now she eats it with an apple, and you know, that's okay. I shy away from apples because I'm diabetic. They crank my blood sugar, but they're not going to crank my blood sugar that much when I eat a fat source like almond butter with them. I just don't eat that. Like I said, I eat eggs and a meat product. Walnuts. Walnuts they're packed with a lot of good stuff. Let me keep these over here because I don't want to confuse things. Don't eat cereals, eat these things. Eggs, sausage, bacon, butter, nuts. Pecans are a great keto nut, as are macadamia nuts. Macadamia nuts are wonderful. They're my favorite, by the way. Pecans, macadamia nuts, and there's one other nut that's really, really good for keto. Now, this is very good. This is tahini. It's ground sesame seeds. It's got a certain type of fat in there that stimulates, geek warning, AMPK. I'm not going to go any further than that, but it's got some significant added health components that you might like. Avocado's number, it's a play on Avogadro's number. We're talking about what? Avocados here. Avocados are wonderful. Now, a lot of people say it's stylish to eat avocado toast. Have the avocado toast without the toast. Or, you know, you can try a keto bread, but I would just do the avocado. Macadamia butter, nut butter. Coconut butter. You say, well, how am I going to eat that? I have this every day for breakfast. I put it in my coffee. And Jesus puts butter in his coffee. Again, we mentioned these. Walnuts are just packed with nutrients. Oh, and here are a couple of animal products. Pecorino Romano cheese. That's got a certain type of fat in it that's very good. You ever heard of C15? We've covered that in a couple of videos. We can cover it again if you have interest. Let us know. And you may have been wondering what was in this box. Kippers. Now, a lot of people have sardines for breakfast. I don't. I hate sardines. And when I first tried kippers, it's herring, kippered herring, canned herring. It was hard. I had to develop a taste for it. But I ate it for 30 days, and sure enough, no, I still didn't have a taste for it. I still had to make myself eat it. So I just quit. I gave up for a few months. And then in one day, I found myself thinking, you know what? I'd like to have some kippered herring. Now, some places like World War II in the United Kingdom, UK, England, World War II, this was a favorite breakfast food. So there we go. I hope that helps in terms of just being very concrete on what to eat and what not to eat. Just one more special mention on this stuff, tahini. Nick Norwitz he's a friend of ours, and he did a great video on this the other day. Here's what's interesting about tahini. It contains a special chemical, a special part of the sesame seed butter oil that really cranks up ketosis. So you can go into much deeper ketosis than you would have expected with this stuff. Let me know if you have an interest in it, and we'll cover it more deeply in another video. Just leave a comment. So Is there a solution to the cereal problem? First of all, what's the solution? Skip the sugary cereals and just opt for foods that nourish your body. Like, if you're going to eat oats with fresh fruit, eggs, avocado, and again, steel cut oats, not something that can be made instantly. Now, I've seen this cereal. It's called Magic Spoon. This video is not sponsored by Magic Spoon, but let me tell you, it doesn't really seem that bad. It's not made with so many carbohydrates. It is still processed. So even if it's all protein, processed protein's not the greatest either. So I really don't eat Magic Spoon. Hey, if your cereal has a cartoon mascot, it's probably better suited for Saturday morning TV than your arteries.